There are way too many complicated words and frameworks out there that claim to be the best way to use AI for your business. I want to give you a simple framework and show you how to actually apply it to you and your business in a much easier way. I think most people approach AI without any real framework at all, or maybe the ones that are way too complicated. Maybe they open a chatbot, type something, get a mediocre result, and then walk away either disappointed or convinced that somehow they need to find the magic prompt or, the magic tool, the magic model. The tool isn't the problem, right? And the prompting that you're doing necessarily isn't the problem. The approach that you're taking probably is the problem. So I want to give you a framework you can use both individually and as a company for almost every use case of AI. It's called ECHO, ECHO. And the name kind of is the point, right? AI is supposed to echo you, your voice, your team, your business, your judgment. It's not something that's supposed to replace those things or sound like everyone else's generic output. When you use AI well, what comes back should sound like you amplified. Here's what that looks like in practice, right? Evaluate, right? Start by evaluating what's actually going on in your business. I like the three bucket approach to this, and you'll see a lot of companies recommend this in kind of varied ways. So the three buckets are what can be completely done by AI, what should be done by humans assisted with AI, and what has to be remain like fully done by humans, right? So again, evaluating based on those three buckets. So you're looking at the work at hand and roughly sorting it into those three buckets. The key questions are, okay, what does this workflow actually look like? Where's there a human component that really matters where judgment and relationships are doing the heavy lifting? Where is it that it's just a clean cut objective process that just happens the same way every time without a whole lot of judgment involved, right? And you don't need to figure this out alone either, right? This is actually a great conversation to have with the AI itself to help you figure it out. Talk it through with your team, bring that information in, lay out what you're trying to figure out, and then let the conversation kind of help you sort it out. I'll go deeper on how to determine what belongs in each bucket in another video, but for now, again, that high level understanding of that E in the echo for evaluate into those three buckets, right? That high level move is simple. Just evaluate before you start automating. This C in echo is conversational context, right? Just conversation, right? This is the biggest mindset shift in the whole framework. So let me kind of spend a little bit of time here. So most people treat AI like a vending machine, right? They believe that if they just insert the perfect prompts, then the perfect output comes out. And then so they kind of stare at a blank chat box thinking, well, what do I even say? And when the output disappoints, they assume they prompted wrong or it's just not a good AI model and they need to upgrade or get a different tool. You got to stop trying to write the perfect prompt. That's actually hurting you, right? Have a conversation instead. So before I got into AI consulting, I was actually helping people tell their life stories for their families and also helping business owners kind of create content, right? In both situations, what I was helping them do was communicate stories, right? Or communicate what they were trying to say, what was kind of in their head and the things that they were trying to communicate, but it was hard to do. I saw the same thing. When people try to communicate on their own outside of conversation, it ends up being really difficult, right? And they don't communicate what they're actually trying to say. And like for example, if you just ask somebody to write down their life story, unless you're a natural writer, they would really struggle to do it. It would miss a lot of detail and it would end up being like very dry and generic. Like I learned this firsthand. I once asked one of my family members to share their life story. So I had it for my kids and future generations and used a tool that would just kind of send them these static questions about their life, like, what was your childhood like? We ended up getting super dry responses and I was really disappointed. So I ended up just sitting with him for a few hours and had a conversation and I learned more about him than I had in like the past 10 years, more than even my wife had known him, all these things. And I've seen it with business owners too. They had the same problem. It was hard for them to create content, but they had so much knowledge and stuff and stories. And just in an hour of conversation with these business owners, I could draw out plenty of stories that would create content for months. Whereas if they just tried to sit down and produce something on their own and just kind of staring at a blank screen, it'd be really difficult. My point is, conversation is the best way to draw out that full context. And there's plenty of research that backs this up. Conversation is the easiest way for people to communicate, especially when communicating depth or kind of fleshing something out. Unless you're a natural writer, it's really hard to get those thoughts out in detail outside of a natural conversation, right? There are things that like you don't even know you were thinking or trying to communicate until in the context of a conversation and like somebody kind of poking in a certain direction, that comes out. And all that to say, AI works the same way, right? Say what you're trying to do roughly as you know it, and then say, hey, have a conversation with me about this. Challenge me. Ask me what details you need. Help me flesh this out. Instead of just thinking like, well, can you do this? Ask like, how can you do this? How can you help me make this happen? Let's talk it through. Let it help you figure out what to say. Let it, in a sense, teach you how to prompt it, right? The AI will build a far better prompt through that conversation with you than you ever could just kind of going in cold. And that whole thing becomes a lot less easier and less overwhelming because you don't need to have everything figured out beforehand. In fact, it's better that you don't, right? I think you can think about it like a Swiss Army knife business partner, right? One that has all the world's insight and knowledge, but ultimately doesn't know your business specifics the way that you do. That collaborative conversation between the two of you is what produces those powerful inputs, right? And again, the context piece surrounding the conversation ties right into this, right? Part of the conversation is asking, okay, what do you need to make this happen? What tools, what company documents, what connections, right? And you just kind of ask, have that conversation and let the AI help you figure that out instead of you having to like spend hours trying to figure out, oh, what do I need to give the AI? And then you don't end up doing it, right? Or you end up doing it in a way that's not really what it needed. One practical tip on this, literally use voice because that's how you typically have conversations, right? So like a lot of the time I recommend some kind of voice to text tool because you end up saying a lot more talking than you would typing, right? You kind of self-filter when you're typing, you don't feel like typing as much and all that. But and there's all that. And sometimes it's useful if you need to get really specific in different scenarios, but with AI, I think a little bit of that rambling can actually give it in natural language, give it all the context you can. It'll help you like clean that up and again engage in that conversation, right? That's why there's actually a lot of software engineers. There's a joke running around how like people are kind of just like whispering into their computers in the office space because it's so much easier to like code and build things and do what they want with AI with these voice tools. So, popular tools are like Whisper Flow to do this well. That has a free version but paid, but then there's other tools too you can download for free on your computer, all kinds of options that are there. And I'll cover that in depth in another video, but again, like you just these voice agents that you can literally talk to are like increasingly being built into the tools itself. So again, if voice isn't practical for you at the moment or you just don't like doing that, that's fine, but at least just type like you're texting somebody, not like you're filling out a form, right? And I think again, conversation is the best way to communicate with AI. Not like over-engineered static prompts. It's really as simple as that. Okay, now we've covered the E and the C in the echo. Now we're on H, right? Honing. So once you have an output, this is where you can really step in. Okay, how do you fine tune it? How do you get it to where you actually like it based on your taste and your standards? This is where a lot of the judgment comes in, right? AI gets you a good amount of the way there with whatever you're working on, but that last 10% is really important. That last 10% is you, right? Whatever that output is, whether it's a piece of content, company workflow, anything, you hone it until it's just right. And here's a part most people skip, right? Once you've honed it, save that, right? They're like, these are the edits I made. This is the output I want. And these are the adjustments I wanted. Save that as, now there's something called skills in a lot of the AI platforms, maybe a simple template, standing instruction, whatever kind of format for that makes sense for the tool you're using and how you work. That way the output gets better and better over time because the AI is learning your taste instead of just starting from scratch every time. You'll still always want to do the honing pass, but it'll probably get simpler and simpler over time. Okay, and the last part in the Echo framework, right? We got E, C, H, O, right? O for ownership, right? This is that last piece that connects to honing. And at the end of the day, it's really the most important part in the age of AI. It's also the answer to a question hanging over all of this. Is like, why does these businesses still exist when people can just hire individual contractors or these individual tools and just have AI do it for them? Ultimately, it comes down to ownership, right? People are paying for ownership, for somebody to take ownership, for accountability, right? Your customers are paying for you to be the one who is ultimately accountable for the output. You're paying your employees for the same thing, right? And AI cannot give anyone that sense of accountability. It has no accountability. You can get as mad as you want at the tool or the company behind it, but that's not going to do anything. That's why you need a culture of ownership around what your team produces with AI, right? If you or your employees are just using AI with no ownership over the result, it defeats the purpose of kind of having that, having you in the loop, having the team in the loop, having somebody work with your company, because anyone could do that, right? And ownership is that thing that can't be automated. Like, it's like the idea of like, I want to be able to choke somebody if they get the job wrong, right? Or call them out, or like that's what people want, right? We've actually seen this before in a different form, right? Like white labeling things and outsourcing even to other companies for cheaper labor. Like that didn't kill US based companies. Like it had an impact to be sure. Like don't get me wrong, it had a huge impact. But even when customers knew the work was being outsourced, they were still paying for the company that owned the results in the US and stood behind it, right? That same principle holds true with AI. Companies won't just like cease to exist or be hired here just because the AI can do stuff. Because people will still want people who take ownership, real people, real corporations that are comprised of people they're interacting with, frankly, people that they can sue, like all these things, right? um, Putting it together. So like again, that's the echo, right? That's AI as an echo of you and your business, not a replacement for it. Again, E is for evaluate, using that three bucket approach. What can AI do completely? What should be a collaboration between humans? And what needs to stay fully human? C is for conversation, right? Shift your mindset from vending machine to a business partner you have a conversation with. Conversation is how you avoid that blank stare at the prompt box, and it's how the AI can get the context it actually needs to echo your business. H is for honing, right? Your judgment, taste, the output, that last 10%, the fine tuning, the little words that you don't actually use and you want change. Say what you learned so it compounds, right? O is for ownership. You, not the AI, are ultimately accountable for the result. That's what your customers are paying for. It's why your business will still matter going forward, right? This is something I teach everyone I work with, and I encourage you to teach it to your team and kind of start incorporating it yourself, right? And there's a simple way to start with this week, right? Maybe take one task you'd normally hand off to AI with a single prompt, and instead, again, start that conversation with it, right? Tell it what you're trying to do, ask what it needs from you, have the conversation, hone the output until it sounds like you, and then be able to put your name on the result of that, right? Be able to confidently say, yes, I am good with this. This is my result. This is what I want, right? Run and then run one full task through that echo, and you'll feel the difference immediately. Because here's the truth, right? This framework is far more important foundation than whichever specific tool or model you use, right? You could use this framework with a model from like 2 years ago and get better results than somebody just using like, the top model today, but doing it with none of this context. The tools will keep changing, right? But having a simple, reusable framework is what lasts and will get you the most impact.